Today's date is the 12th of October, 2019, and with the Community Media Center here in Westminster. And we're interviewing John this morning, and he is a World War II veteran, and he's 95 years old. So I'm just going to kind of ask you a couple of questions, and then I'll turn it over to you, John. Were you drafted or did you enlist?
I was drafted right out of high school.
Out of high school?
Yep. I was out of high school 2 weeks and I was in the Army.
Is that right?
Yeah.
So they had
I was turned 18. You know, we had to register for the draft, and I graduated in February of 1943, and in March the 7th I was in uniform.
Is that right?
Yeah.
Didn't give you much time, did they?
No.
Where were you living at the time?
Living in Govins in Baltimore City.
Okay.
In Govins area.
Uh-huh. Okay. Did you pick the service you joined, or did this?
It was kind of funny. They bussed a group of us down to 5th Regiment Armory, where we were interviewed, and the recruiter asked us, you know, what branch of the service we wanted. So I liked airplanes. I said, I'd like to get in the Air Corps.
Okay.
And he looked at me, and I'm wearing glasses. He says, "No, you're wearing glasses, and we got too many in the Air Corps already." And I said, "Well, how about the Navy? I got some friends in the Navy." He says, "No, we've got plenty of guys in the Navy now. You got to go in the Army, but since you're wearing glasses, I'm going to stamp your papers as limited service." And he put a rubber stamp on there, limited service. I thought I was going to shuffle papers the rest of the war. Boy, what a surprise that was.
Yes.
So they packed us up and put us in buses, sent us down to Fort Meade, and we went through all the processing. And I think it was about 2 days there, and then they put a whole trainload of us on the road, and we went to Fort Jackson, South Carolina, and became a part of the brand new 106th Infantry Division. It was the last infantry division activated during World War II. So I was in it from the start.
That was a guard unit?
No, it was a brand new unit activated on paper, and
okay.
And they had 14,000 guys in the division to begin with.
Mm-hmm.
We didn't have any choice that I could see about what we were going to do as far as our occupational specialty went. They just called out so many guys and said, "Go in the barracks here." Another batch of guys go in that barracks. Then later on in the day, they told us that we were in this 106th Division and we were in the field artillery, which was 18 years old. Great, that was okay with me.
Sure.
Yeah.
Sure.
Let's get at it.
Okay, that was a 105?
105s, yes.
Okay.
And of course, it was a while before we got into practicing, you know, our field maneuvers.
Sure.
I don't know how many months it was, but we had to go out and live in the field a week at a time, and then it was 2 weeks at a time. Then we went to Tennessee maneuver area, and we were in the field for 3 months, and in the winter.
In the winter, your boot camp was.
It was Fort Jackson.
Fort Jackson.
Yes.
And how long was that?
That was until from March until December.
Okay.
And then at the end of December, we went to the Tennessee maneuver area. Lived in the pup tents. Lived in the field there for 3 months. Then from there, we went to Camp Atterbury, Indiana. And that was for advanced training. But it so happened that, you know, June 1944 came along, and the invasion.
Right.
And they were taking a lot of casualties. So they came to our division and probably a couple others that were in training. And they I say recruited, they selected about half the division, mostly enlisted men and a few lieutenants, about 6,000 guys out of the division, sent them to Europe as replacements. Then they filled us in with guys from the the Air Corps. They had up to here with them.
Mm-hmm.
And the ASTP program, where they would send the guys to college.
Right.
And places like Coast Artillery and other units, you know, that they didn't feel a need for. They filled us in with these guys. So after training in Camp Atterbury, they sent us at the 1st of November. They sent us to Camp Miles Standish, Massachusetts, and one day in November, I don't remember the day exactly, but they put us on ships and sent us to England from Miles Standish out of Boston. And our battalion, in fact, I think the whole field artillery unit, 4 battalions, were on one ship. It was called the Wakefield. It had been an ocean liner before the war, called the Manhattan. And we went to England, got there around the end of November. And while we were there, lived in pretty nice barracks. I think they had been there since the days of King Arthur.
Right.
Anyway, it was double-decker bunks and no heat or water. They had a building at the end of this, I'll call it a Battery Street, called the Ablutions. And if you had to take care of business before dark, you best do it, because at nighttime it got foggy and drizzly rain, and it was all blackout conditions. So when you walked outside, you literally couldn't see your hand in front of your face. So if you were caught short at night, you were in trouble. Anyway, around the end of November, we moved, we had drawn all of our equipment, and end of November we moved to Port of Weymouth and boarded LSTs. And we went across the channel on LSTs, and couldn't go inland for a couple days, and we just kept bouncing around in the channel until finally we were looking out there, and this place was literally full of ships. And we were off the mouth of the Seine River. And as our turn came to get in line, our LST got in behind another ship, and it was like circus elephants going up the Seine River, one behind the other. And you could almost throw a baseball from one to the other. They were following that close. And we went all the way to Rouen on the Seine and beached up there. And then we had to hang around in the mud for about 2 days for the rest of the division to get there. 14,000 guys, took a while to move them. Finally came along, and we got into convoy and started east, went up across France and through Belgium. And at this time, the front lines, we want to call them that, were more or less on the boundary between Germany and Belgium and Luxembourg, north to south. And it had been what they called a quiet sector. They were moving guys in there to be replenished and rested. And they moved us into a place where the 2nd Infantry Division had been for about a month. They had been beat up pretty bad at the Battle of the Hürtgen Forest, and anyway, they were, quote, resting up. So we took over their positions, foxhole for foxhole, and gun positions for gun position. A lot of their howitzers, we just took over, and they took the ones that we were towing, and they left. So that was about December the 8th, and it was quiet. It was very quiet, and those guys that left, they said, "Oh, you'll have a picnic here. Nothing's going on." And nothing was, really. We could hear the Germans. They were close enough their side of the line that we could hear motors running and noises of all kind. but it was no firing. Once in a while, maybe a shell would come in, and we'd fire a little harassing fire over at them, but nothing really was going on till December the 16th. I just happened to be, I'm getting ahead of my story, but that's all right. We only have a half hour, right? I was on outpost guard December the 16th, about 5:30, 5:45 in the morning, when artillery shells began falling all around us. I mean, literally, it was hailing artillery shells. They were hitting in the trees and exploding and hitting in the ground. And my weapon then was a 50 caliber machine gun that was like partially dug in, not real deep, but it was deep enough for me to get in there in that hole and crawl into my helmet as far as I could go.
You kind of a target, weren't you?
And my buttons were in the way. I couldn't get low enough. But anyway, that was the beginning of the Battle of the Bulge, and this artillery barrage went on for probably half an hour. Seemed like all day. And the positions that we had taken over were pretty well organized, and the guys from the 2nd Division had dug in their foxholes and roofed them over with logs and all that. And we didn't have any casualties after the artillery barrage. But that gave us a warning, you know, we were about to be in trouble. So that happened a couple times during that day, and the German infantry, we'll have to precede this. The positions that we were given encompassed about 22 miles of front. And this is way too much for any one division.
Sure.
The book says 4.5, 5 miles max. And we had 22 miles to cover. So the infantry units were holding what they called strong points, which of course they weren't very strong, and they were separated. So, and of course the Germans had been there before us, and they knew everything about the area. So it wasn't long before the German infantry, being backed up by their tanks, started moving in on us and surrounding units and capturing a lot of guys. And before we got away from there, I'd say by 2 days later, the Germans had captured about half of our infantry.
Oh.
About 6,000 guys. 2 regiments, 3 regiments of infantry in the division. And the Germans pretty much wiped out the 422nd and 423rd. Most of them prisoners. They suffered, I think, about 500 killed and a couple thousand injured, but most of them prisoners. Being in the artillery, we were situated a little bit behind the infantry lines, and of course we had noticed what was happening. And I was in the 589th Battalion, which had 3 firing batteries, A, B, and C, and a service battery in the back. I was in B battery at the time, and C battery was to our left and up in the woods. I don't know why they put them there, because they were ineffective there. Anyway, the C battery was surrounded and pretty much captured, and A and B battery had to get out and move back. So the 4 howitzers from B battery, which I was in, they got out of their position, and we piled on the trucks and moved back about 1.5 miles. A battery had 4 howitzers with them. They managed to get 3 of them out right away. The 4th one had a problem of some kind, and the battery exec stayed with that gun crew and finally got them on the road. So we moved back about 1.5 miles, I guess, a place called the Iron Creek. And B battery put their howitzers in position in soft ground by the creek. That was a mistake. We weren't there more than maybe an hour and a half when a truck come down the road from the front saying, "Get out, get out, get out. The Germans are right behind me." So A battery got, their 3 guns were okay. They got them on the road. B battery had to spike their guns and leave them. And I piled my backside on a truck as it was coming by. I grabbed on it. So I'm going down the road with the truck. The fourth gun from A battery finally did get on the road, and we were headed northwest, I'll say, on this road to the town of Schoenberg, and the Germans were infiltrating all around us. The 3 guns, howitzers from A battery plus all these guys, probably a couple hundred guys, got through Schoenberg. By the time the 4th crew got to Schoenberg, the Germans had infiltrated there. They had a tank sitting in the road, and they knocked this truck out, killed a couple guys. The rest of them were taken prisoners. And the lieutenant, the battery exec, a guy named Lieutenant Eric Wood, hollered at the guys that were still able to follow him. And he took off running across his field and got into the woods without being hit. And nobody saw Lieutenant Wood after that until he was found about the end of January, say 27th, 28th, when we were moving back eastward. And he was found in the woods with about 7 Germans, dead Germans, around his body. So speculation says he accounted for himself. In the meantime, the guys who were left from the 589th, which amounted to a couple of hundred and plus a few maybe, plus the 3 howitzers and the vehicles, were on the road for the whole day of the 17th and part of the 18th. The evening of the 18th, orders came down to who was in charge there, and it just happened to be the battalion executive officer, Major Parker, who had inherited the command by this time. And they ordered him to split the group up and send half of it back to this town of Manhay, which was still in American hands. And the other half of the group with the howitzers were ordered to go to this crossroads on this main road leading from Bastogne to Liège that the Germans had to take. So I was lucky enough to be in that group.
Ooh, luck out.
And we arrived at this crossroads where there's basically 3 stone buildings there that the largest one had been an inn, restaurant and an inn, not real big. And one of them was a farmhouse with a barn attached, and I don't know what was in the other one. They're all 3 stone buildings. So we moved in there with a little over 100 guys and the 3 howitzers and small arms and set up a defense. And this was the night of the December the 18th and the morning of the 19th. And it was quiet, nothing happened. But the evening of the 20th, the Germans caught up to us. It seemed, a lot of this I found out a long time after the war. While this is all going on, I don't know anything. I don't even know what country I'm in, much less what's happening around me. So anyway, what happened was the Germans finally caught up to us on the night of the 19th, and again I was on an outpost. And another guy and myself had a foxhole dug in the ditch alongside the road. This was a north-south road that went from Bastogne up to Liège, and the Germans really wanted that road. Being the wintertime and snow all over the place, bad weather, their vehicles had to stay on the road. They had tanks and all that. They would just bog down if they got off the road. So the roadblock was essential. Well, the night of the 19th, they showed up as a patrol where I was, myself and this guy named Sewell. And we're sitting in this hole this night, and about midnight, really, really quiet, we hear some swishing noise. What the heck is that? It's really quiet. Nobody, nothing else was making a sound. And out of the fog comes about a dozen Germans on bicycles. They were the head of this patrol that was advancing. And I'm a little bit ahead of my story here. In the meantime, during that day, there was 3 half-tracks from an anti-aircraft unit, the M16s, I think they had called them.
Right.
Had 4 .50 caliber machine guns on them. And Major Parker was a good salesman. He got them to stay and help with our defense. So one of those guys had his 450s laid down the road, right where we were, and they also had an M8 scout car from a recon outfit there that had a 37 millimeter cannon on it. And we part of our defense was a chain of mines across the road, just maybe 10 to 15 yards away from where we were in the hole. When the Germans got to those mines, they stopped and they started talking, and I picked the phone up. We had a phone and a wire back to the command post, and this Captain Brown was in charge of us. I said, "We have some Germans in the road. What should we do?" We're sitting there with 2 carbines, and there's about a dozen of these guys, and they're carrying all these automatic weapons. He said, Captain Brown said, "I'll fire my .45, and that'll warn you that we're going to open up with a quad 50. Keep your head down, and when we stop firing the quad 50, I'm going to fire my .45 again, and that'll be a signal for you 2 guys to get out of the hole and get back to the command post and make it quick." You can hear him now. So that's kind of what happened. He fired his .45, and Ken Sewell and I, we got down in the hole as far as we could get, and they opened up with those 450s, and they just went right by us like that, and chewed up that patrol. I don't know what happened to those guys, because I didn't move my head out of the hole to see. And I heard the .45 go off again, and Sewell and I, we jumped out of the hole and ran across this field back to the command post, and it was like the Roadrunner cartoon, And my helmet bounced off, and I thought, the hell with the helmet. I just kept running.
Yeah.
Well, I get back to where the command post was, and they had one of the howitzer crews set up there. And I kept calling the password. Password was Coleman, and the countersign was Burner. I kept calling, Coleman, Coleman, Coleman. And some guy took a shot at me. And I started hollering something else. A lot more. You don't want to record what I called him. Anyway, he recognized me as being one of them. So I wasn't hit, and nobody got hurt. And we checked in with Captain Brown, and then he detailed us to another hole. And the next morning, when the Germans pulled back, that recon party, they met resistance, we call it. So it wasn't until the next day that we had a perimeter defense of foxholes around us, crossroads, and the Germans were like in the woods, out the other side of the fields, and they would shoot at us now and then and drop mortar rounds in. they didn't have any heavy stuff for whatever reason, but we didn't care about that because we had a few guys get hurt, and there was some casualties. The mortar rounds dropped in on some of the vehicles and got some of the guys. And I was spending my time in the ground, so I didn't really see a lot.
Sure.
But now it's the 22nd, and we held out all day on the 22nd. Every time they would probe, we'd fire and run them back. But we were essentially surrounded. And the 23rd, the Germans apparently got fuel for their heavy vehicles, and they came up the road with them and started knocking the place down. And by dark, we were in dire straits, and a lot of guys were becoming casualties, and they knocked out our half tracks with their, I guess they were tanks or assault guns. That time, I really couldn't vouch for what kind of vehicles they were. Every time we saw a tracked vehicle, it was a tank, as far as I was concerned. Could have been an assault gun, could have been a weapons carrier, or could have been anything. But in the panic there, you don't discriminate. So it was getting dark on the 23rd, and they were blowing the place apart, and myself and another guy took refuge in one of these stone buildings, and we were sitting on the floor back against the wall, and a lot of stuff was flying outside, and it's just about dark, and we're sitting there, and something must have hit the wall up about in there, something big, and blew a big hole in the wall. The room filled with rocks and dust and all. And I looked at my buddy and I said, let's don't wait for another one. And we went out the door, and there was about a dozen cows out there in the road. And we ducked through them and to the other side of the road where there was a field, and it looked like the Germans were attacking from that side, so we were going down in the field. And unfortunately, he got hit with something, and never did find out exactly what it was, but it was probably a mortar round because it knocked him down and busted him up pretty good on the right side. And I went over to him, and I was wondering how I was going to help him out. Could we get away from there? And quite frankly, I didn't know what I was going to do. But I looked up ahead of me, and there was two GIs coming up out of the woods. They were from a unit from the 82nd Airborne that had been sent down there to help us out, but they got there too little and too late. But they were there, and I motioned to these guys come up and give me a hand, which they did. And between the three of us, we got our buddy out.
So.
I remember turning around and looking back to where we had come from,
Right.
and everything was on fire. Vehicles, buildings. I was far enough away to where I really couldn't tell what was going on, but I knew that I wasn't going back that way.
Sure.
So I stayed with these 82nd Airborne guys all that night, and they put my buddy on a Jeep, and he disappeared. So I didn't see him again until 1986.
He survived.
He showed up at a reunion.
Right.
Yeah. And he survived. Yeah, he's still alive. He's still alive. Lives out in Michigan, but he and his wife both are using walkers and assisted living.
That's amazing.
But he did survive. Yeah. He had a hardware store over the years.
Yeah, that's some tough stories.
So that little battle was over for me. I was going to try to find some of the guys from my unit, so whenever I saw some American soldiers, I would say, you seen anybody from the 106th Division? And eventually I found one that did. He says, yes, there's some vehicles down the road here going down. So they were from our outfit, that part of it that was not at the crossroads. And it was one that had our duffel bags in it, and mine was there.
How about that?
My duffel bag. I still have that duffel bag.
You do?
I do.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I bet you have a lot of mementos there with you.
Well, no, I didn't bring a lot of mementos, but after the whole thing was over and we were pulled out, we went into occupation in areas. And during one of those times, I picked up a few things. And just before the Germans surrendered, they moved us to the port of Lorient, France, where it was a submarine pen. And the Germans that were occupying that submarine pen, they were pretty well protected from attack because it was just a big concrete reinforced place, and it was futile to try to attack it. So the 66th Infantry Division had been sent there to surround it and make sure nobody comes in, goes out, which they did. And when the war was over, they still didn't want to surrender, so they picked our unit to go down there and help out the 66th Division. But by the time we got into place there, they decided to quit. So we took all the Germans out of there and took them to POW pen. And that was pretty much my last action.
Okay.
In the meantime, we had advanced westward, or eastward rather, beating the Germans back from where they had come. And the map there, I can show you.
You got the map?
Yeah, you want to take a look at that?
Sure. If you got something special to show us.
Yeah. This shows you, come on, I've got a paper clip on there. Just as a side note, probably not many people realize this, but the country of Belgium is about the same square miles as the state of Maryland. So to give you some idea of perspective there,
Sure.
It's not the same shape, but it's the same square miles. Now, this was the original line down here between Germany and Belgium and Luxembourg.
Okay.
Luxembourg's here. And when the Germans attacked, it was along this border here. It was about 60 miles long, and it was 3 divisions that occupied those strong points. 28th Division in the south, 106th Division in the middle, the 99th Division up here. And in between there were other smaller units like recon units. The Germans penetrated actually back as far as this red line. And this was their high water mark, the little town of Celles in Belgium. And that's marked with a Panzer tank on a piece of concrete.
Right. I see that.
Bastogne is down in here somewhere, right here. It's Bastogne. Bastogne seems to get a lot of publicity because there were reporters there.
I see. I understand.
There were reporters there. Okay. Anyway, it was, that was their high water mark, and then the Allies, with all the divisions, were shuttled in both ways and squeezed the Germans back out. And some of the strategic guys, studying the strategy, wondered why the Americans and the British didn't attack here and cut them off and take them prisoner. And I can't tell you why. It sounds practical, but maybe it wasn't to happen. I don't know. And the place that we held the crossroads was right here.
Oh, okay, right in the heart.
Right smack in the middle.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
And the Germans were, they came up through this way and surrounded Bastogne, never did take it. And their aim was to go on up to Liège.
Sure. And there's France right there in there.
Yes, France down here.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And look, okay.
Yeah, this is not a big area.
Mm-hmm.
Not a big area.
Right. It looks bigger than it is.
Yeah. I think you hear a lot of statistics that it was like 600,000 German troops were involved, 400,000 allies. And, statistics, I don't like statistics because they're never right.
Right.
But anyway.
How about, do you have any thing there as far as awards and decorations?
No. I'll just show you. These are a couple of recent books.
Okay.
And this is the last one that came out. It's on the market on Amazon. And that's me.
Whoa, great. Huh. Good looking fella.
And this one's about the Bulge.
Okay.
And this one's about my division.
106th.
106th. And there's me again.
How about that?
So these are available on Amazon.
Okay.
They're dirt cheap.
Okay. I'll have to copy that down. Yeah.
I'm actually in about 10 different books.
Mm-hmm. Did you get any awards for your service?
Oh, the award, the award came from France, believe it or not, for the defense of Parker's Crossroads, which the battle became known as.
Okay.
And the battalion was awarded the French Croix de Guerre with Silver Star.
Mm.
Prestigious.
Sure.
But American, I guess the American Army had too many places similar to that.
Mm-hmm.
We weren't the only ones holding crossroads,
Sure.
roadblocks. And there's several websites. One called Indiana Military, which is a website that has the history of divisions that trained there. And I've been the historian for our division association for a long time, and I've collected a lot of memoirs from our veterans, and they're now stored on websites.
Mm-hmm.
And if you just put in 106th Infantry Division in your search.
106, okay.
106, yeah. You will get a lot of that. My memoirs are in there as well, and I think that started me off. I was not unlike a lot of guys in so much as we never talked about the war afterwards. It wasn't until 1986 that I went to my first reunion, and there was 19 of us there from our battalion. And we got to talking, and the dam broke loose, you might say, and then we opened up since then. So the information is out there on the website, and of course Amazon books and Barnes and Noble and all them. A lot of books have covered the events.
Well, sure want to thank you for your service. It's great to meet you. And,
Well, yeah, it was interesting, to say the least. I used to say I was lucky I kind of changed that to say I was blessed.
Yes.
I was not hit. The only problem I had physically during the war was my feet, and I managed to take care of that myself. I never went to an aid station. Probably should have. Would have got some compensation. Well, it's kind of funny. Not too long ago, I went to the VA to get registered. And,
Good.
they gave me an examination, and this woman doctor, had me stripped down and looked me all over, and I hadn't had my shoes off.
Mm-hmm.
She says, "Take your shoes off. I want to see your feet." So I did. I thought, well, maybe I'll get some compensation. She looks at my feet and says, "My, you have good-looking feet." Well, there's no compensation there, is it?
Uh-huh.
Oh dear.
So
that was all right with me.
Good.
I'm better off not having the compensation.
Okay, so you're registered with the VA, and you're
Yeah.
great.
And I was going down there, annually for a checkup, and
Good.
I haven't been down there for a couple of years, but I did. They did provide me with hearing aids.
Sure.
And that's really about the only thing that I've hit the VA for.
Okay.
Thankfully, I don't need them.
Good. Good. Absolutely. Okay. One question. What if you were talking to a young person today about the military, what would you suggest? Would you suggest entering the service or avoiding the service?
I think that we ought to have a policy like I think Switzerland has, where everybody graduates out of high school for a year of military service.
Mm-hmm.
And they're taught, how to use weapons, discipline, which is a good thing. And I think that would be a good experience for every teenager.
Have 1 year service.
Yes, 1 year service.
Okay.
Any kind. If they want to be SEALs, okay. If they want to be a typist, okay.
Yeah.
Any.
Just simply back to the.
Yeah.
Give something back. Okay.
Right. I think the problem in the country today is not so much as the education that they're touting now. It's when the kids are little.
Right.
The parents are not there to discipline them.
No dinner table talk.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
And I have grandkids who are married and have kids, have great grandkids, and both parents work,
Mm-hmm.
and the kids go off to day school, and I don't think that's the same way to do it.
Right. I understand.
I'm old-fashioned.
Sure.
Yeah.
Okay, so well, thank you. It's really been a great interview, and this will be on television, and we're going to keep you in mind, and we appreciate what you've done for coming out today.
Okay.
So, thank you very much. I'll shake your hand. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.